All right, welcome to Politics. So glad to talk to you Monday. I'm Hal Ginsberg, of course. Give us a call. When I say us, that includes, of course, Arlen Grossman. You can see Arlen on your screen. You saw his image, bottom left. Now you actually see Arlen live, top left, for Monday's Politics. Welcome, Arlen. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Hal. It's been a few weeks, but I'm back and I'm ready to rock and roll.
Just setting up your audio a little bit. We were coming in a little hot there, so there might have been a little feedback. Just want to get rid of that. Thought we had taken care of it during the break, but I guess not. So Arlen, first of all, how was your trip back from Vermont? And just let me, if people are wondering why we're starting late, it's because Arlen is now on the left coast and it's 3 hours earlier for him. So rather than force him to get up at that ungodly hour, that god-awful 8:30 a.m., you might have to get up at 8:15 to be here at 9 your time. We're postponing it to till 11 a.m.
Yes.
And is that late enough for you, Arlen? I hope it's not. I hope that's still not, infringing on your beauty rest.
Well, I woke up 15 minutes ago, but I think it'll work out. No.
Well, that explains a lot, actually. So tell us about the trip quickly. You sent us that picture you posted on Facebook, and there was a big arch right in the middle as you're crossing a river, and you asked where you were. I responded with no clue. I assumed the arch and the river were not clues to where you were, but maybe they were. I don't know.
I would think that the first thought would be McDonald's, but a couple of people finally guessed it. It was the St. Louis Arch.
It was very well done, Arlen. I think you definitely gave a nice suggestion to us without absolutely just putting, greetings from St. Louis on the image. So very well done. Arlen, go ahead.
Yeah, this is, I think, the first time since I've been on with you that we've actually started on time. I think that's pretty good.
Well, it helps when it's late, right? I mean, I had a lot of time to be ready to go over our the slides or the images that we'll use and the topics as well. But it is true, timeliness has been a struggle among many other factors as we do this live stream. I try to do the best I can, but obviously it's always a work in progress. Having you on, though, does make things better. The conversation is always good. And what I also like, Arlen, is we're not seeing eye to eye on a lot of the topics that you choose or that I choose. I find areas of pretty strong disagreement. So here's my question. I asked this off the air. Let me ask it on now. What do you get out of this? What do you get out of coming on and having me push back and challenge you and, kind of take, I think, of course, you don't see it that way, but I think I'm taking apart some of your arguments. What do you get out of that?
Yeah, good question. It is a challenge. I like the challenge. I like the idea of being on the air. I used to love being on the radio, and it gives me a chance to spout out about what's going on in the world because I do follow pretty carefully, all the things going on in politics and world news. So there's several reasons, and so far so good. By the way, I didn't mention where I've been. Since August, I was in Vermont. And very beautiful there, as you know. And Nancy and I, my wife, came back for the last 10 days or so. We were on the road driving back to California, saw a lot of interesting places along the way, and arrived a few days ago.
Well, I like the hat, Arlen, the Vermont hat. And you just explained something to me that clarified or corrected my misapprehension. I thought you'd been in Vermont since maybe late spring, early summer, but now you're saying you just went out there in August. But Nancy is there for a little bit longer. Is that right? Longer in the season?
Yes, she goes in May because she's from the East Coast. She loves being there. I'm a little bit, I'm a Californian, so I like to stay a little longer in California. But then we get together, I fly over in July and then we meet and stay and then we go back together after Thanksgiving. We drive back.
Well, as I mentioned, Arlen's going to be with us as long as he likes, even as long as he'll put up with me. We'll be happy to keep him here, and we do this on Mondays. But this will be the last Monday in 2023, as the next week I'm off, and then the following week I believe next week is Christmas Day on Monday, and then the following is New Year's. I'll be off all next week. So,
well, Hal, do I get paid for the time you're off?
You know what? You're going to get a holiday double time.
Oh,
So
cool.
I'm going to actually double what I pay you now
Amazing.
for
I
the
like that.
following week. So Arlen, let's get to the topics. I really did. Oh yeah, you say yeah. It's the challenge. It kind of makes you kind of have to rethink some of your ideas and maybe, understand the issues even a little better when you argue with someone and discuss. And I think that's true. I hope also we get to a point where we can actually not only just try to figure out how we can make our arguments stronger, but actually reconsider our views. I do try to do that. I don't know that I always succeed in allowing those who challenge me to cause me to modify my beliefs. But I try sometimes to be open to that. I wanted to start with what I believe is the moral question of our day. And this is not a new one. I've raised this, but maybe not with you, Arlen. In light of, and I'm going to make some statements you may challenge, you may disagree, but there'll be assumptions underlying the question. In light of what I think is really the unspeakable evil of what Israel is now doing in Gaza, what is our moral responsibility? Do we have an obligation to do something? And if so, what is that? And that's why what can, and I cross out what, and then with the red X, must we do? I noted there the sniper killed two, the Israeli Defense Forces sniper killed two women inside a Gaza Catholic church. We'll hear from a archbishop on that. And worse, it's a little bit hard to read there, but in pink, Al Jazeera footage reveals bodies piled up after an Israeli attack on a Gaza school. And what witnesses are saying, and there are images, you hear what people say, we're ignoring the witnesses of the violence against women and the sex crimes that Hamas committed on October 7, but there hasn't been really any documentary evidence whatsoever. There are some statements by purported witnesses, but there's no forensic evidence. There's no pictures. But when it comes to what Israel has done is doing and has done to Gaza, there's lots and lots of documentation, and we'll hear and see some of that. I also quoted their famous quote from a pastor in Nazi Germany who talked about Niemöller was his name. I believe it was Reinhold Niemöller. First they came for the communists. I did not speak out because I was not a communist, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's an irony there, of course, because the ultimate Nazi victims were Jewish people. And now tragically, and I don't ascribe the atrocities to Gaza by Israel to Jewish people, but to Israelis who happen to be Jewish. Nevertheless, they are Jewish and they are committing atrocities. So there's really some irony there, tragic irony. Do you think we have an obligation to do something, Arlen? And if so, what is that obligation?
Yeah, we do. We're the ones that give Israel a lot of money, and we certainly have some clout there. We should, but unfortunately, we're not getting through to Netanyahu, who is really the evil force here, because he's not very well liked in his own country. The polls are really down, and he's let a right-wing government take over the country, and made things so much worse. And the Israeli people are unhappy, but they can't do anything about it. It's sort of like our situation with Donald Trump when he was in office. We had him, but we couldn't get rid of him. So,
but what obligation? And I agree, of course, that people like Biden and others who have real power have an obligation to do something. But what about you and me? Do we have an obligation? What is our obligation? What is the obligation of ordinary people?
Well, it's like any war. I mean, we could protest against it, and this one we should protest, because the problem is as bad as Hamas was, and they were awful, the proportionality of response is the worst part that's going on right now. We're having a lot more innocent people in Gaza being killed, and there's just no excuse for that kind of overkill. So,
well, I'll play this video in just a second. It's heartbreaking. This is from Al Jazeera, and I have not seen this in American media, which is very unfortunate, I believe. It certainly seems too well documented, and I don't think anyone would claim Al Jazeera is not a credible source. Now, they may get things wrong like everyone does, but I think they're pretty widely respected as a credible source. So let's hear from this woman. It really is heartbreaking. So just bear that in mind if you don't want to hear something really awful.
We begin with harrowing images and testimonies obtained by Al Jazeera from inside a school in northern Gaza following an Israeli attack. bodies of a number of displaced Palestinians.
And let me just say, this was earlier last week. So this is within the past week or about a week ago that this happened.
Seen piled up inside the Shadia Abu Ghazala school, that's west of the Jabalia refugee camp. Witnesses say a number of people, including women, children, and babies, were killed execution style by Israeli forces while they were sheltering inside the school. Witnesses say they did not find any evidence of shelling or missile attacks.
All right, so they find the bodies of the children and others in the school, and there's no shelling. It wasn't as though there had been, some sort of a firefight or between Hamas and IDF. Israel just came in and mowed these people down.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the bad things about this is that people blame Jews for this, even though most Jews really don't like what's going on there. And there's an increase in anti-Semitism and, all of this, the more this goes on.
I don't know that that's true, Arlen. We hear that. And I know a lot of Jewish people are crying anti-Semitism all the time, but I haven't seen the evidence of that. And you've seen me go into detail in response to some of these articles, pointing out that there's really no specifics. There's no pictures of anti-Semitic imagery that's been shared or video footage or anything like that. It's just a lot of people crying and saying, oh my God, they don't like me because I'm Jewish. I can't wear my kippah around. But there isn't any specific tangible evidence of a rise in anti-Semitism that has been adduced in these articles. I'm not saying it isn't happening. I'm saying I'm not seeing it.
Well, I've sent you some documentation.
I did. Where was it? Where was it, Arlen? What was the specific incident that occurred?
Well, I'm talking about organizations, schools, people all around the country are
they say it. I know, but what happened? What specific? Did they find a swastika inside a school? Was a kid beaten up? I mean, that's what I want to know. We know in Burlington, Vermont, where you just were, 3 Palestinians were shot. That's an example of a specific incident that occurred that we can easily say was motivated by Islamophobia. What are these incidents that all these Jewish people are whining and complaining about that supposedly purportedly show this huge increase in anti-Semitism?
Well, I think it's a little overkill now. I mean, there's definitely been people who have talked about their experiences in college with people, putting swastikas on their doors.
I didn't see that. I didn't read anything. People say, people will look at me funny if I walk into a room. And in the same articles, you hear Jewish people, some of them saying, and it's even worse because I'll see at a Palestinian rally, I'll see a Jewish person. So what they're saying is it's not anti-Semitic, it's anti-Israel. And they're equating anti-Israel to anti-Semitic.
Well, there's a lot of people who just automatically are anti-Semitic and they love the opportunity.
Well, what are they doing? What are these anti-Semites doing exactly? That's putting us all at risk of another Holocaust. Because I know there's a Holocaust going on right now in Gaza. I see the bodies lined up. But what are all these anti-Semites around the world doing to Jews?
Well, I think we're not going to get anywhere on this. I mean, I've seen stuff, you've seen stuff, and we can't document it right now.
I haven't. Well, if you can't document it, I'm not buying it.
I could document it, but it'll have to be after this show.
Well, please do. Send it to me, because if you send me anything with a specific time, date, place, and especially a photograph or video, I will play it. I guarantee you tomorrow I'll play it first thing. Because, and I did say, look, there was a guy at Cornell, and I talked about this, who did post on social media threats to kill Jews. And that was scary. That's anti-Semitic. There was an attack in Pittsburgh many years, 5, 6 years ago, I think now. It's been quite a while, when there was a massacre at a Pittsburgh, maybe not 5 years ago, maybe like 3 years ago, massacre at a Pittsburgh synagogue. Horrible, totally anti-Semitic. But I'm talking about these claims by people on campus. I'm afraid. I'm Jewish. I'm scared. Of what? What happened? Why? That's what I want to see. Because that's what we're hearing about.
I will send you instances of that documentation, and then we could discuss it later, maybe next week or whenever you want to.
All right, let's go back to this. Yeah. Okay, so just a little more from that video, because to me, this is much more... that's what's upsetting to me, not people saying that they're victims in school somewhere.
The Israeli soldiers came in and opened fire on them. They took an old man. The Israeli soldiers stormed the school, took all the men, then entered classrooms and opened fire on a woman and all the children with her, even the newborn babies among them. She, her husband, and her 8 children, together with her cousin. The Israeli soldiers executed those innocent families at point blank.
All right. So I think there's no way to hear that, but just be. Now, I mean, that's not. That, to be fair, that's not the documentary evidence that I demand, just like there are people claiming that there were corpses being raped on October 7, but there's no video footage. But in this case, there is video footage. We saw those bodies stacked up as the camera panned the inside of that school. And there's other examples too, Arlen. So do we before, and I'm cutting you off for real quick. It's not fair to you. I'll give you more time, I promise. What the Arab American community in Michigan is calling for a complete boycott of voting for Biden, that they will not vote for Joe Biden because he continues to call for support for Israel. The hope is that he will stop doing that because he'll realize his chances for reelection, which are already not great, are even more greatly reduced if Michigan Arab population, which is pretty sizable, says we're not going to vote for you. So is that something we should be doing? Should we be leading calls to not to vote for Democrats because Democrats are united in support of more funding for Israel, or virtually united? Is that something we morally have a duty to do?
I would say not. Biden's in a tough place, and he's supportive of Israel, as all U.S. presidents are, but he's also trying to push Netanyahu into, a ceasefire so we could get, hostages out and negotiations. And there's no question about it. There's thousands of innocent people in Gaza being killed, and there's no reason for it. It's overkill. It's not in proportion to what happened in Israel. And as bad as Hamas is, you got to at least respond in a somewhat, similar manner. But we've gone overboard. And
what is Hamas? What should Hamas have done differently? In other words, they are clearly representing an oppressed, persecuted people that have been often used as target practice over the years for the Israeli Defense Force, a group of millions of people herded into a tiny little open-air concentration camp along the Mediterranean Sea, basically a desert. They don't have freedom of movement. Poverty rates are astronomical. Unemployment rates are astronomical. What should Hamas have done differently? What should they do? What would be acceptable to you, Arlen, as opposed to what they did do?
There's nothing good about Hamas. It was calling for all.
I know, but I'm not. It's not about condemning Hamas. My question is, if Hamas did something that we both think was really unfortunate, certainly you think was evil, I think it was a very, very wrong thing to do, is bad. But I'm struggling to come up with an alternative plan for Hamas, given how persecuted and oppressed. I mean, look, Nat Turner, when he led a slave rebellion, did kill, I believe, some he killed some slave owners, but he also killed some children. He killed some wives of slave owners and slavers. And, you could say, well, that wasn't appropriate. They weren't the people oppressing him. So what is an oppressed people's, where does the line get drawn for an oppressed peoples when they're fighting for their liberation?
Well, they probably need different leaders in Gaza, and they haven't voted for Hamas since like 2000.
Oh, well, let's say they had different leaders. Should those different leaders be doing?
Well, they would be going to the United Nations and any other international.
But the United Nations has repeatedly failed to act in support of the Palestinians, and a lot of times because of vetoes by the United States or other Security Council members.
Yeah, well, it's not easy. Obviously, it's going to be but. We have to somehow get together and negotiate something where there's a ceasefire and innocent people don't get killed. And, we can make some negotiations. Now, another problem is Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution, which is very unfortunate because that's probably the only way peace is going to happen. And so Netanyahu is, again, a big problem and certainly somebody that I'd like to see.
Well, we don't have control. Should we, as Americans, and you don't like the idea of withholding our vote for Biden because, your theory is the alternative is worse. Of course, the Biden might respond, though. Biden might say, well, you know what? If I don't tell Israel, if I don't start withholding aid from Israel, if I don't start supporting sanctions against Israel, if I don't start actually sending in the U.S. military to protect Gaza, which is what I think we should be doing at this point, if I don't do those things, I'm going to lose the election, so I'm going to do them. So maybe if we put pressure on Biden, he will actually act.
Well, you got a divided country, okay? You got a lot of support for Israel, a lot of condemnation of what they're doing. So it's really a tough position to be in. And now if Biden makes it look like he's against Israel, then he's going to lose lots of people and lots of money from donors. So he's trying to push Netanyahu. He's trying to pressure Netanyahu, and I hope he gets some success doing that. But there's only so much that Joe Biden could do right now. And although he could maybe not give so much money to Israel if they don't cooperate, that's one way.
I guess what I'm saying, though, Arlen, is in the end, what we're doing is wrong. Right. And we're supporting evil. And yes, Biden's between a rock and a hard place, and there's a tremendous amount of political influence, power, wealth weighing in to pressure him to support Israel no matter what. Yep. I guess, given that fact, what can and should we be doing to insist, to demand that he do the opposite?
Well, I think we could do what we've done in every other war, like Vietnam or Iraq. You protest, you march, you do it, write letters, vote differently. You do whatever you can within reason, but you can't just get rid of all the Democrats, because then we'll be stuck with Republicans.
So you're saying that if the Democrats were threatened with either losing support and very likely getting voted out of office, or stopping their support for genocide, they would continue to support genocide. In other words, your theory is that Joe Biden, Jamie Raskin, your Congressman Panetta, Jimmy Panetta, if they were looking at polls and the polls said to them, if I stop supporting Israel, I'll likely get reelected. But if I keep supporting Israel and its genocide, I'll probably lose. You're saying they would choose to lose, that they're that invested in this policy.
You're making it all sound too easy, Hal. It isn't. It's a very difficult situation to be in.
But there are people being murdered. There's thousands of children are being murdered by Israel. And we are supporting that. How is that complicated? Why is that complex? I don't understand.
I don't think we're supporting that.
We are. We keep shipping more arms to them. Well, we won't even allow a condemnation in the UN of their behavior.
What's going on, and we're pushing hard on Netanyahu. I certainly hope we are. And but if you're saying let's get rid of Biden and the Democrats, then you'll be stuck with the Republicans, and that is.
I'm saying we say to the Democrats, you're not worth our vote. You don't deserve it. You're making things worse, and I'm not going to vote. And not only making things worse, you're responsible for evil. I'm not going to support it anymore. I will not support that.
Well, you're welcome to do that, but I won't. That's a little too extreme.
I guess I look at what's happening in Gaza right now and I say that's what's too extreme.
Well, there's nothing good about it. Obviously, it's a bad situation all around. I mean,
so it's. I mean, is that what you said would have said in 1940? 40 or something, when the reports of death camps started trickling out, that, well, it's a bad situation all around. At that point, we were supporting England. We were providing aid in the Lend-Lease against the Nazis. Now we are supporting the actual Nazis. That's the problem. It's not just that we're sitting on our hands or we're being, like people said, we were too slow. We should have done more to stop the Holocaust. I agree. But at least we were on the correct side of that war, World War II, even before we entered it. But we're now on the wrong side. We're actually supporting the perpetrators of the murders, of ethnic-based murders.
I don't think we're supporting their policies so much, because obviously people are trying to get Israel to slow down and negotiate and have a ceasefire. It's the only reasonable thing to do right now, and it's not easy to get Netanyahu to agree to it. But yeah, it's not the same as Nazi Germany. It's a bad situation.
I
It's
think it
awful.
is. I say it is the same. I say it's
On a
exactly the same.
smaller scale. Innocent people are being killed. I'll give you that. But it's a big, complicated situation, and not that easy to say, oh well, I'm going to condemn Israel and condemn the Democrats, and we're doing awful things. I mean, at least Biden is trying to get Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire and to stop so much of the bombing. I don't know. He hasn't been successful yet, but I sure hope he is.
Let's speak now to someone who knows a lot about the Catholic community in Gaza, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster. Thank you for joining us. What on earth has happened there over the weekend?
Well, as far as I know, and the information comes from, I think, a very reliable source, the Cardinal in Jerusalem, who's the patriarch for that parish. And he said that the compound around the Church of the Holy Family was attacked. Some of its crucial infrastructure was targeted with rockets. And I think most distressing of all, an elderly lady who was leaving the church to go to the toilet was shot dead. And then her daughter, who went out to try and assist her, was killed as well. All of this within what has been clearly designated as a church place, which I cannot believe for 1 minute has rocket launchers in it. And it's a community that since October has sheltered hundreds of people and looked after them. And the religious sisters, the nuns there, have been cooking and feeding people. And the house where they live in that compound, where they look after 54 very handicapped people, the water tanks were blown off, the solar panels were blown off, and the house was rendered almost uninhabitable. So it's a desperate situation for them.
The Pope's called it terrorism. How would you describe it?
Well, it's certainly a cold-blooded killing. That's
All right. So I don't know what else to say to you, Arlen, except how can you even defend for another moment a president who continues to send arms to the country that's doing this?
Well, I believe Biden doesn't want to have those things going on, as I don't. And there are some awful things that happen in war, and we're seeing a lot of them, and I don't doubt them. And Israel has to change. They have to come up with a different policy. And like you and I talked off the air before the show, that Israel actually killed 3 hostages of their own. And for no reason. I mean, they were not wearing any shirts. They weren't threatening. So obviously, they're going a lot overboard on their attack.
So why again, keep going back to this. How can you defend a president who is supporting that country that is responsible for these actions? I understand. I'm sure Joe Biden wishes it didn't happen. It doesn't look good for him. It's not it doesn't make him more popular in this country or around the world. In fact, we're becoming a pariah nation as a result of this. My question to you is, what do you need Israel to do so that you would say, Joe Biden, if you don't cut off aid right now, if you don't call for a complete cessation of any support for this country, I can't vote for you? What would Israel need to do for you to say that?
Well, Israel has to, it has to do what everybody's calling for, which is a ceasefire.
No, I'm saying the opposite. You're not prepared right now to demand that we stop supporting Israel. My question to you is, how bad does Israel have to act? What would they have to do at this point that would cause you to say, okay, I'm done? If Joe Biden refuses to stop supporting Israel, period, end of stop, full stop, I'm done with him. I will not vote for him.
I understand what you're saying, but what's the alternative, Hal? I don't see an alternative that's any better.
So you're saying that there's nothing. It doesn't matter how evil Israel is. It doesn't matter what Joe Biden does at this point. You'll go ahead and support him.
No. It's not that easy, Hal. I don't.
Well, that's what you just said. You just said, what's the alternative? As though that's what matters more.
Well, I like to think that Joe Biden is pushing, and all his people that representing him are pushing.
I understand, but he's pushing, as you've acknowledged, And this just happened over the weekend, has gotten us absolutely nowhere, except it's led to a lot more dead people in Gaza.
So, I mean, what is the alternative? Certainly not the Republican Party, certainly not Hamas, certainly not.
I can't, drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. You keep pointing the finger. You can't just say, this is wrong. I can't support them. Why is that? Forget it. Throw the Republicans out of the picture. Marjorie Taylor Greene said we should stop supplying Israel, by the way. Marjorie Taylor Greene said we should stop. She voted against more aid for Israel.
Yeah.
So my question is, how much, when does the point come, Arlen, where you say, you know what, there's no way I can support this group of people in power right now?
Well, if they stop pushing Netanyahu and stop pushing for peace, then I would, stop supporting them. But I don't think they're doing that. I think they're really trying to get Israel to, get on board with the international community and do some reasonable things. But it's tough because you got a right-wing government there in Israel and you got a right-wing leader. And so it's not going to be easy. But at least I believe the Biden administration is trying to get some change there. And they're doing the best they can, but it's certainly not easy.
Well, if they were doing the best they could do, they would say, we're done. We're not giving you any support. And then Israel would change. Presumably they would. They would. So they're not doing the best they can. The best they can is to say, not only are we not going to support you, Israel, we're going to go into that region right now and we're going to put our military between you and Gaza. That's what we're going to do. And if we said that to Israel, they'd stop.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are things that can be done, but none of them easy. And I just don't see any. But I think the United States should hold back money. That's definitely, I think, what they could do. That's the only leverage that we really have.
Well, Biden's not calling for that. Biden doesn't support that. In fact, if you call for withholding money, which is called BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, if you call for that, then you're called an anti-Semite. And it's also illegal in some places in this country to do that.
Well, I hope that the United States does do the things you're asking them to do, and Israel, gets responsible for a moment. But there's no easy answer, I don't think, to this. I think we could pressure as much as we can, at least. Take some of the money away, take all the money away. I don't know what it'll take, but I'm not happy.
It wasn't easy to end slavery. I mean, we lost 600,000 Americans died in the bloodiest war in American history by far. It wasn't easy at all. Some things are hard, but when you're confronted with a great moral evil, you kind of have an obligation to do what's hard, I think.
Well, you can't equate what's going on in Gaza with Nazi Germany or slavery or any of those kind of things. It's a much smaller scale, and it's wrong. And it's
for the people who are there, it's the biggest scale there is, their entire lives.
Yeah,
there aren't as many victims. I'll give you that. There aren't as many victims in Gaza as there were in Europe in the early 40s, and there aren't 100 million. Perhaps they say possibly 100 million African Americans were ultimately impacted by slavery. So, and when I say Americans, I don't mean the United States of America. I mean for the entire Western Hemisphere. So, okay, we will not agree. But so let's move to the next story here, which was yours, and I actually think it kind of proves my point. Of course, I always think everything proves my point. But here it is, Michelle Goldberg, what's driving former progressives to the right? Do you think the failure, the fecklessness, the inability of the Democratic Party when confronted with true evil, which is what we're seeing in Gaza by Israel right now, when confronted with endless war, the Democrats have consistently made bad decisions. Do you think that could be part of the reason some progressives are disenchanted with it at this point?
I don't think that's a big reason. I think there's a lot of things going on there, and it's very disturbing to see some of these people who were progressives kind of moving away from there. And it's amazing to me that Joe Biden and Trump are so relatively even in the polls. They shouldn't be that way. I think Biden should be ahead by 3 or 4 times whatever Trump can get. But, the situation is what it is. And there's a lot of people around this country who are MAGA supporters. And, one problem I see too is there's a lot more right-wing media than there ever used to be. And there's not much of an equivalent of left-wing media, the way I see it.
Well, don't you think it's a lot more equal now than it was? I mean, in the 90s and when I started KRXA in 2005, the radio was completely dominated by right-wing voices. Talk radio was, and it was very influential, much more so. Many more people watched it then than people or listened to right-wing radio then than they do today. You also had Fox News utterly dominant. There was no real alternative to Fox News on the left. Now MSNBC and CNN are both they're there and they have pretty decent sized audience. I think every now and then Rachel Maddow actually gets more listeners or viewers than whoever's on Fox. And also getting back to talk radio for just a sec, have the media landscape has been fragmented by YouTube, and you have lots of YouTubers like myself and people who get millions of viewers, not a few dozen, but people like Jimmy Dore, Brianna Joy Gray I talked about before, many others who are on the left and clearly on the left. And so I think we're less dominated by the right in terms of media than we were in the past, Arlen, actually.
Well, I would disagree because there's like 3 or 4 television stations. They're all trying to imitate Fox and doing pretty well. And you've got a very strong social media presence by the right wing. And radio certainly is controlled. Talk radio is controlled by the right wing. So, and now we've got newspapers disappearing, which is a shame. And I think you had more reasonable information when you had newspapers. And now everything is kind of, pushed to one extreme or the other. And the Democrats have to work harder to get, some kind of media presence that can counteract what's on the right.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. I mean, you get to see, wonderful leftists like Claire McCaskill, James Carville. I mean, really salt of the earth people who just love American workers, people like Hillary Clinton. I mean, they're all over the media. So it seems that the Democrats have plenty of opportunity to get their message out through their supporters. So, I mean, if you're a spokesperson for a Democratic administration, you walk right out of the White House and into a job like we see with Jen Psaki. So I don't, guess I think the views that you espouse, Arlen, I wouldn't call them necessarily, or I don't say that you espouse, but views that you often cite, which as for somewhat to the left, I wouldn't call them progressive at all. But there's no shortage of people who agree with Joe Scarborough and Bill Maher, who are very influential in media. In fact, I would say those are 2 of them, Joe Scarborough and Bill Maher.
Yeah, and Joe Scarborough is certainly very anti-Trump and anti-Republican.
Right. So that's the point. Your view is found all over media, that view.
Well, yeah, but that basically just CNN and MSNBC, because there's no other really strong outlets where you get that kind of, information. I mean, of course, there are websites and social media sites, but they're certainly a lot stronger on the right than they used to be, and they're very
well. They have a lot of appeal. There certainly is quite a bit of appeal to working people, and we've even seen that appeal rising among voters of color, which I think must come as a great shock to many, and we know it does. So I think the Democrats need to grapple with the fact that they're doing something wrong, terribly, terribly wrong, and that's what I think is most frustrating about this article by Goldberg. There's no navel gazing. She never says, well, maybe we should be doing this or maybe we should try that. It's just everyone else is wrong and it's depressing and miserable, but there's nothing wrong with us. And that's, I think, a big problem because that's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, Democrats have a lot of work to do. They're obviously not doing as well as they should be doing. I mean, you've got a lot of positive things you can say about Joe Biden. The economy's picking up. He's got a lot, he's had a lot of infrastructure built. And he's done a lot of things. He's keeping Obamacare alive, but Republicans have nothing. I mean, they have.
But it's not their policy. So in other words, the Democrats have nothing to apologize for. There's nothing that you can look at and say, these are bad policies that we shouldn't have followed. We made life worse for you. We're sorry. We're going to change.
Like I said, the Democrats have a lot of work to do. They've done.
Example. What's a policy that Joe Biden should renounce that he's pursued in the past? Or what's a course correction you would recommend for him?
Well, I think he has to get the message out a lot better.
But that's not a course correction. That's just marketing. I mean, in terms of policy.
Well, I think, what he's trying to do, pressuring Israel, is one positive thing, I think. And, that's in the news. People are seeing that. He's trying to push Israel to a more, moderate stance. And I think the Israeli people.
So you agree with that policy?
No, I want him to do more. But I don't think he can totally renounce Israel, and give the other side the advantage. That's not a solution either. So, but the Democrats, have already a lot of things to run on, and I hope they push it a lot harder. And also, of course, let everybody know all the awful things that Donald Trump's doing, and all the criminal charges that are going to be against him, and rape charges and all that kind of stuff.
Well, why do you think that this has been out there? I mean, there's no question. There's no shortage of articles condemning Trump and people in media going after Trump. Why do you think so many Americans shrug and don't care? Is it just that they're deplorable people who are evil?
No, but I think they're just not getting exposed to the other side that much. I think the people in those red states and, middle of the country, their media is a lot stronger than on the right than the left. And certainly, they can't relate to a lot of progressive Democrats and show business.
Well, do you think if progressive Democrats went into, say, I don't know, Kentucky, and they actually went into Kentucky, and they went into the hollows, and they went into the Appalachian areas, and they said these towns are impoverished and you don't get paid enough and you're being exploited by your employers, and we're going to take them on. And not only that, we're going to fight like tooth and nail to guarantee you and your children health care from the moment they're born until they die. We're going to make sure that if you have a smart kid, he's going to get a good education. He'll get to go to the University of Kentucky. You will never have one penny of debt as a result. Do you think if the Democrats voice that message, that might make them a little more popular in some of these areas?
Actually, they already did, Hal. They elected a Democratic governor, and he's a great guy. And it's a very red state, but they elected a Democrat, and he talked about the same kind of things you're talking about. You got to look at where people are in the economic times, and he offered some hope, and they reelected him. Just like a lot of the midterm, off-season elections have gone so well for the Democrats. For one thing, you've got, of course, the abortion issue. The Republicans are taking away freedoms that they never did before. So, they just have to keep doing
so
that.
When Democrats credibly fight for poor, struggling, and working people, they win elections, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're losing elections suggests that in those elections, the candidates that they're nominating and supporting aren't fighting for poor, struggling, working people. Isn't that right?
Well, another problem is, the right wing makes Joe Biden out to be a criminal. They're trying to impeach him, all these terrible things.
Well, it doesn't look good. I mean, his brother, his son, they're clearly influence peddling.
Yeah, but that's fine, but not Joe Biden. He never got involved in that stuff, and they have no proof.
Well, he made calls. He got on the phone when his son called. His son said, "Hey, guess who I got on the phone? My dad, Mr. Vice President. Oh, hey, how's it going?" He did do that.
Joe Biden knows when to back off, and he knows not to get involved in the kind of business that.
I don't think it looks good, Arlen. I don't think this is an easy one to spend.
There's no evidence. I think people are already saying, well, what is this thing about impeachment? There's no reason for it, and there isn't.
Well, I think a lot of people on the right said, why are we impeaching Trump for allegedly conspiring with the Russians when he didn't?
Well,
and that's why, those impeachments went nowhere, because he wasn't. So I think it's the same thing.
Well,
although, I mean, there is a little bit of there with Biden, but I agree. This is political theater. It's absurd. The Republicans, it's not like I think the Republicans are any good. They're not. What I am urging Democrats to do, the Democratic Party, Democratic leaders, Democratic and Democratic voters like you, is not be so certain that you're just right and that anyone who doesn't see it your way is ill-informed or getting bad media or doesn't know the facts or doesn't quite understand how hard things are for Joe Biden. I'm asking you to recognize that the Democratic Party, probably since Nixon or since Carter and getting steadily worse, has embraced corporate America, has embraced international corporatism, has embraced the war machine, and has betrayed working people time and again. Now, if you want to argue that the Republicans are on balance even worse, I won't argue with you. Maybe they are even worse. But that's not a good argument to people who are suffering. That's not a good argument to people who are in debt. That's not a good argument to people who can't get health care that they need. Well, you think we're bad, but look at the other guys. So what I'm saying to you is the Democrat Party needs to change fundamentally, or we will continue to see elections like this, and we will continue to have a fundamentally divided nation.
What'd you call the party again that you're just talking about? What the name of the party?
The Democratic Party.
Okay, because I thought you said Democrat Party.
No, I said the Democratic Party, but if I said Democrat, I mean, see, you should call them I didn't say Democrat. I always call it the Democratic Party. But if you call it the Democrat Party, which I don't, why make a big deal about that? It's not, people are like, really, that's your takeaway? I mean, I get it. When Rush Limbaugh did it for all those years, he was just trying to, mock them. But I mean, aren't there better things to fight about? Wouldn't it have been a better response to Rush Limbaugh to say, well, guess what? Bill and Hillary Clinton want every single American to have health care from cradle to grave. You don't.
I don't see
Wouldn't that have been a better response to Rush?
Of course, but I don't think anybody's talking about what the Republicans call the Democrats. It's more, it's a lot more, difficult than that. And there's a lot more that, and the Democrats just have to get a better message out there. And you're right, they should try to be more progressive, more with the people. And I think you're seeing a lot of good things happening in the economy. You're seeing employment doing good, unemployment going down. So inflation's coming down, the stock market's at a record high. There's a lot of things to run on, and I hope Democrats could push that message and improve their position.
Well, I think that's not untrue, Arlen. I think what you're saying is the reason that Democrats, for example, didn't lose the House, or they did lose the House, they didn't lose the Senate in 2022, and most people thought they would. And I think, Joe Biden in some ways is kind of a special case, as is Trump. Trump is a very unique Republican. Trump is not like other Republicans in a lot of ways. He actually did embrace a much more populist message than any other Republican we've seen in recent times. And that's why he got elected. I mean, quite simply, he, unlike any president in recent times, except for Bill Clinton, he really did speak to working people. Now, like Clinton, he betrayed them, but he did speak to them. And so that's why he was beloved by many of them, or is beloved by many of them.
And there's another issue, unfortunately, for the Democrats, and that's the issue of age. Joe Biden is 81, and that really is too old. I mean, he doesn't show him, declining. I think Trump is declining a lot faster than he is mentally, but it's not a positive for Joe Biden, and it's unfortunate, and he will lose some votes because of it, I think.
Well, Arlen, you are such a good sport to come on with me and put up with me, and I really do appreciate it. I hope some folks get something out of this back and forth. I want to continue this. So why, and by the way, again, click like, click subscribe. The bottom right corner of your screen is the blue and white Halitics circle. That's how you subscribe. Click like if you have subscribed, or if you don't like it, tell me what is wrong with the program. But
There's a phone number there too, and people
There
should call.
is, yes. Arlen likes the calls. He wants to talk to anyone but me. So 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. It does work, absolutely. So I want to, but back to Michelle Goldberg, your piece. So this is, I'm going to jump around because there's a lot to it, but she had this in there, she makes the point that the right is much better than the left at harnessing hatred of the status quo. So I think there's truth to that. I agree with that. Why do you think that's the truth? That's the case, Arlen?
Well, first of all, that's all the Republicans have. All they do is attack, and make the Democrats out to be evil, and so that's all they have. But in truth, what's going on in the status quo is not as bad as the Republicans make it out to be. Like I said, the economy is doing much better, but yeah, again, it's messaging that's really important, and people could easily see all the problems in this country, and they have to, and a lot of them will blame the Democrats because they're in power, supposedly, although the House of Representatives is totally Republican. So yeah.
But in terms of demonizing the status quo, the Republicans are just as much the status quo as the Democrats in many. I mean, there's obviously going to be a few exceptions in both parties. I mean, I do think Lauren Boebert's sort of wasn't she from a poor working class family? She's not like someone who from an Ivy League college like the Bush clan or someone of that ilk. But in general, the establishment probably is, if anything, even more Republican than the Democrats are. So why do you think the Republicans do harness? It does seem like it, the bitterness, the anger that so many people, and I think very understandably, have towards the decision makers.
Well, they're pushing it. The Republicans are pushing it really hard. And there's a lot of crazy right-wingers that were elected to the Republican Party, the MAGA crowd that will, do just about anything to destroy the country, destroy the Democrats, make things worse, and that's all they do. So but there are problems with the status quo. Obviously, there are a lot of things that need to be fixed in this country. I think.
Well, do you think part of the issue is that the Democrats have not really challenge the status quo, even rhetorically, the way the Republicans do, or at least the way the Republicans do, blaming Hollywood, blaming, whoever they decide to attack. Whereas the Democrats very rarely talk about Wall Street malefactors. They don't talk about Silicon Valley job offshorers. They don't talk about the oil and gas industry as world destroyers. Maybe part of the problem it is, whether you call it marketing or language or whatever, the Democrats don't even take on the status quo. They basically are part of it. And unlike the Republicans, who at least feign being, separated from the power, the Democrats seem to embrace their role as insiders. The last Democrat who wasn't even a real Democrat, who ran, I think, an explicit anti-establishment campaign, Bernie Sanders, was incredibly successful beyond anyone's wildest dreams. He almost took down Hillary Clinton, and almost, not quite, but very, very, very close, even though she had everyone, everything, all the wealth and power behind her, all the influence behind her. He still almost did it. So when Democrats or progressives do, in fact, try to harness the legitimate outrage at power, they are successful, as Bernie was. Is that not the case? Isn't the real problem that the left doesn't even try to harness all that anti-establishment fervor all around the nation?
Well, of course, I love Bernie, but another problem the Democrats have is no matter what they do that's going to help the situation and go against any of the giant corporations or oil companies, no matter what they do, it's always blocked by the Republicans. They don't want anything to succeed. And so the Democrats have very little room to do anything because the Republicans are going to block them at every possible way.
All right. One other, this kind of caught my attention, was that comment about the status quo. And I talked about the story Friday. Arlen, do you think this kind of situation, let me see if I can get this slide up for everybody. Do you think this is not a good look, shall we say, for the Democratic Party? The Boston mayor invites everyone in the Boston City Council to a holiday party, which is actually only for electeds of color. So if you're a white elected, you're not invited. It's not that this is celebrating electeds of color. This isn't to celebrate how far we've come or look at how we're making great strides as a government. If you're white, you're not right. You don't get to come. And now one of the, I guess on the other side of that is Denise DeSantis does put her pronouns in the invitation. So I guess maybe people who care about pronouns will be delighted. But I think most Americans, correct me if I'm wrong, find this incredibly off-putting and offensive.
I do too. Anytime you get into identity politics, the Democrats are going to get hurt. Most of the country that's red, are not minorities, and so they don't, they kind of, I think, resent all the.
Can you understand why they would? Putting aside they kind of resent it, can you understand why maybe a South Boston resident who doesn't have a college degree, who works their butt off and, is barely making a go of it in an incredibly expensive city where maybe his or her for generations lived since the 1800s. Can you understand why they might find this offensive?
Yeah, I find it offensive too. And, the Democrats have to kind of move away from that kind of identity politics and stressing that so much because it's not working.
Do you think they stress it because they don't have anything else?
Well, for one thing, they need minority votes. They have been losing Black voters, Hispanic voters. So I guess they're going to try and keep those people.
Well, why are they losing them if they have electeds of color parties, electeds of color only parties, and put in pronouns? Wouldn't that cause them to get more votes from these minority groups?
Well, I can't totally, understand.
Obviously, that's a tongue-in-cheek question. Most people don't give a crap. They're not. No, you're a struggling African American. You don't. Some party for a bunch of electeds? I care about making enough money so I can pay the rent every month. What are you doing to help me there, Mayor Wu? That's what they care about.
Well, they've got to start thinking about what the alternative would be to the Democrats and Joe Biden, because they don't, because to them, the alternatives aren't all about what I guess matters to you. What matters to them is enough to pay the rent every month. What matters to them is not going into debt or going to deeper debt if somebody gets sick in their family. And they believe, and based on their experiences, which are very different from many Democrats, their experiences are, we're on our own. Nobody's helping us. Nobody's there for us. Yeah, there's a lot that hasn't been done for them, but I think they should actually listen to me because I've got the answers, and it's not going to be the Republicans; it's going to be the Democrats.
But because they have parties for electeds of color and put their pronouns in their emails.
Well, of course, stupid things are done all the time, and especially on the right.
So Mayor Wu is so completely clueless, so tone deaf. She would have thought your picture of the Gateway Arch and the Mississippi River didn't contain any clues either as to where you were, just like me. She is completely, well, let me ask you this. Do you think she's really this stupid? She is responding to the outrage by saying, well, the problem was we mistakenly sent the email to the white electeds also. If we just hadn't done that, there'd be no problem. It was just an honest mistake. She doesn't get that the mistake is that government shouldn't hold parties where you exclude people because they're not the right color of the skin. She doesn't seem to get that. The problem is I invited you and I sent you an invitation by mistake. So is she really that stupid, or is this her way of dodging, acknowledging what a huge F up this is?
Well, she obviously made a very bad decision, and there's no excuse for it. But I think she's not typical. I think there's a lot of people who are a lot smarter than she is.
Well, I hope there are, because if she really believes that the problem here is there was a truly honest mistake when it came to typing the email field, then she's really stupid. And I'm going to believe you don't get to be mayor of Boston if you're that stupid. I'm going to believe that she's just trying to, she's being incredibly disingenuous and avoiding the reality, which is, when governments hold parties, you don't exclude people based on the color of their skin, period, end of story. And I don't think she gets that.
Yeah, I don't know her particularly, but it's a stupid decision that she made, and she can't be that bright if she's going to.
All right, Arlen, so we're really at the end of the hour. We have one more story. So let's give it to you real quick, because this is yours, and I'm going to try really, really hard to bite my tongue and let you take over. So here is, let me see if I can get that slide up. Here we go. This is another story you asked me specifically to share. And so tell us about this story.
Well, this is actually good news. The far-right extremists like Alex Jones and Giuliani and Fox News had to pay tremendous amounts, hundreds of millions of dollars. And that may be the only thing that may stop some of these people from their, the lies and the cheating and the terrible things that they're saying. At least they have to try to tell the truth, or they're going to, they face lawsuits of this size.
Yeah, no, it's a good story. I'm glad it happened. And what I find really powerful about this is that the plaintiffs were able to document specific harms that they suffered as a direct result of the lies that both Alex Jones claiming, I guess, that the Newtown shooting didn't happen, and Giuliani insisting that somehow there was a fraudulent vote in Atlanta or in Georgia in support of Biden, which was complete BS, completely made up out of whole cloth. And people were really harmed as a result of their actions. People were, I think they were targeted. They were doxxed online. They were made to fear for their safety. And they suffered greatly. And these bastards, these MFers that you see on your screen right there, are rightly being forced to pay up.
And what happens often in these cases when Alex Jones says something and Rudy Giuliani says something that's a lie, they're, MAGA base, there's a lot of irresponsible, crazy, violent people out there who, will go after whoever these guys are saying are bad.
Well, they're cult leaders, plain and simple. They really are. I mean, I don't know about Giuliani, but certainly Jones is, and he's kind of the worst. Him and that guy Savage were really at the bottom of the barrel. And they do have followings. It is really hard for me to understand. I try to defend, people for their votes and come up with explanations that I think are non-nefarious for why people vote the way they do. But I, for the life of me, do not understand how anyone could listen to Alex Jones and not realize that he is the lowest form of,
it's really hurt
just absolute piece of garbage.
People have their children shot in elementary school, and he's saying they're fake, that it didn't really happen. I mean, that's horrible. And, he's done that for a lot of things. And unfortunately, it's, I'm glad he's paying the price. I hope he will.
I hope he is too. I hope that those courts systems are force them to disgorge their ill-gotten gains. And I do ask people who watch or listen to their programs or watch Jones or people like him or Savage, just don't buy their crappy products that are just, snake oil, which is what they are. So snake oil salesmen. So hopefully they won't. All right, final words, Arlen. Anything else? You want to go back? I won't even push back. You can challenge something I said, and I'll just sit here and take it with my lip buttoned.
All right, you're wrong about everything, Hal, but that's okay. You're entitled to your free speech, and I'm going to let you have that.
And that's the final word. I assume that's going to do it. There's really not much you can say past you're wrong about everything. I think I'm just going to assume, Arlen, I don't know that you got a follow-up to that one. We'll see. Hopefully it will follow up, though. I believe it will be Jan 8, 2024.
Oh.
And unless something untoward happens, Arlen will return. I'll return tomorrow. Arlen, thanks again.
All right, enjoy your break. Enjoy your holidays.
All right, just stay there. Don't hang up or turn off your phone or anything, because when I shut off, because I don't want you to disappear until we're done.